Hello everybody, John from the esports department here, going over the LCK power rankings and futures. This one not as exciting as a couple of the other ones we've done so far. Unfortunately, there was already book adjustment as well on some of these futures lines. It's made it a little bit less appealing than some of the other leagues. But let's talk about the lineups. Let's talk about futures possibilities, power rankings. The first roster for the LCK, Afreeca Freecs. Keen, you're going to recognize. Keen been one of the best top laners in the league for quite a while. The team has never really quite come together. Dread going into the jungle, I think Dread's going to be a good player, above average. We've seen him plenty of times, and I think that him and Keen is not a problem for this team. The biggest issue for this team has always been its mid lane, and they're sticking with Fly, which bothers me. They played Fly for a lot of last season. He had maybe the best season of his career. We talked about this a little bit on the Gold Card podcast, but he had maybe the best season of his career, and it still wasn't enough to put this team above sort of like a gatekeeper level. They switch up their bottom lane. They go with Bang and Lehen. So Bang coming over from Evil Geniuses in North America. Lehen's from HLE, splitting off from Viper. Bang and Lehens, I think, have the potential to be a pretty good bot lane, but it's not like Mystic and Ben or Mystic and Jelly didn't have the possibility to become a good bottom lane as well. And so I'm a little worried that this team just doesn't have anywhere to go because they're just so middle of the pack. Like, Keen is an above average top laner, Dread right about average or slightly above average in the jungle, Fly a below average mid laner, and then if they get an average bottom lane again, which is kind of what I think Mystic and Ben turned out to be, if Bang and Lehens are also kind of an average bottom lane, the team just doesn't have anywhere to go. They just sit in that gatekeeping position in like 5th place, having a really hard time beating anyone ahead of them, usually beating the teams that are below them. I don't have much faith that that's going to change this year. If you like the upside on Bang and Lehens, then maybe Afreeca's in contention for the title, but I just think they're going to have a really hard time contending with some of these top teams in the LCK. That said, they're not a bad team. I think there's like almost no chance you're going to see this team bottom 3. They're just maybe are going to have a tough time competing with some of these other teams, such as Damwon Gaming, running back the same roster that they won the World Championship with, except for the top lane where they switched from Nuguri to Khan. I do think Nuguri to Khan is a downgrade. But I'm not sure that it's a big enough downgrade for you to really be worried at all about Damwon. The rest of the team's crushing. The Kespa Cup looked like easy mode for them. It's hard not to make them your favorites coming into spring 2021. The team just crushed Worlds. They just crushed the Kespa Cup. It's pretty hard to say anything negative about Damwon, even with the downgrade from Nuguri to Khan. We'll see how that plays out. Maybe Khan has a bit of a resurgence on this team. It's not like FPX was going great and he was time-splitting some of the time. So maybe he has a bit of a resurgence and ends up being a side grade from Nuguri. I think people like Gelati already think it's a side grade. The team just looks great. I mean, it's hard not to have them as one of your top teams or your top team in Korea at this point. Moving over to a team with a little bit more changes, DRX. So we're going to get Kingen in the top lane, Pyosik in the jungle. Kingen coming back from BLG, solid top laner. I think he's the one that we'll end up seeing in the top lane rather than Destroy. Pyosik, the rookie that they're building around, I think that's a good decision. I think Pyosik was great last season. Anybody that watched his progression over the year, I think it was pretty clear that he was a future star in the making. So good to rebuild around him. Then we deal with 3 people that are the new to the roster. Solka in the mid lane, Bao at AD carry, and Becca at support. All 3 of these players coming up from DRX Academy to some degree or another. Solka on Ulsan, and then DRX Academies. All 3 have been through the DRX Academy system. I like that. They're rebuilding through their Academy system. Definitely gives hope to anyone in DRX Academy that, you know, the team that they have faith in you. They've looked towards the Academy team when they need to fill roster spots. That said, none of them are particularly touted prospects. And it looks like this is kind of a team that you're going to want to check back in on spring 2022. I think you're going to see this team decide they're going to keep Kingen, they're going to keep Pyosik. Destroy will probably stay up there as a backup to Kingen and come in if Kingen's not playing well. But for Solka, Bao, and Becca, I think you're looking at a team that's going to try to figure out which one or maybe two of those three are the future of the team and going to look to replace come summer 2021 or spring 2022. So this is another team I think we're going to want to look back at summer or spring 2022, but probably nothing to be too excited about for spring 2021. Over to Fredit Brion. So a lot of changes here. Brion Blade, formerly High Fresh Blade in the Challengers Korea. Hoya coming from the Griffin system. You're going to notice, and we've talked about this kind of extensively in my other stuff as well, you're going to notice that Griffin and T1 Academy are just very well known for pumping out the best prospects. And so when you hear a player is coming from the Griffin system or is coming from T1 Academy, those are generally you're going to be the better prospects coming into the league. Hoya is one of those coming from Griffin. A solid addition to the top lane. I think you could see him be a top half of the league top laner here right off the bat. I think he's a good addition. Chieftain coming from BLG and Vici and then went over to High Fresh Blade. You guys would know him if you've watched the LPL. He's played here and there. He's been pretty impressive when he's played. He's been pretty good. I could see him being a solid player in the overall scheme of the LCK. Lava in the mid lane. We've seen Lava a lot, mostly on the HLE squads. I just don't expect much from Lava anymore. At one point, he was a prospect that was kind of highly valued. He's never really been on a decent team. He's had some flashes of upside, but it's never really been anything that's been too, this guy's the next Faker. I just have a hard time really trusting him to do more than just the basics. I think he can be a league average or slightly below league average mid laner, but I don't expect too much from him. Henna, the new 80 carry coming from High Fresh Blade. Not a particularly touted prospect, just someone that they're bringing up to try to fill in the gap. We'll see if he sticks around. Delight coming from T1 Academy. So the two premier prospects for this team, Delight and Hoya. I just don't see any big upside for this team. I think this is another team that's similar to DRX. You're going to want to look back at them next year. I think Delight has places he can go. I think Hoya has places he can go. I think Chieftain, if he gets unleashed as the real starter for this team, has things that he can do. I'm not excited about Lava. I'm not excited about Henna. And it's just going to come down to, who can they pick up to replace if the team looks like they could be challengers later in later seasons. If Delight and Hoya are great players, if Chieftain is also a great player, then you got three. Who are they going to replace Lava and Henna with in the future? They could surprise me. Obviously, Lava could have a resurgent season. Henna could come up. But for me, it's going to be about Delight, Hoya, maybe Chieftain. And we're going to have to look back at this team spring 2022, same as DRX. Next up is Gen.G, running it back. We've just got Gen.G, Ruler, Life, BDD, Clid, and Rascal. They bring in Flawless as a possible backup, Karis as a possible backup, but I think we're just going to see the same five running it back. And honestly, I feel pretty close to the same way about Gen.G that I felt about them last split. I don't think they're probably going to win the title, but I'd be shocked if they weren't top 4. And they always have that upside. It's just going to take one series, maybe two lucky series, even if they're not the best team in the league, to end up with the title. So a contender, but not one of my favorite contenders for sure. Very similar to how I felt about them last year. Over to Hanwha Life. A lot of random stuff going on with Hanwha Life. So I think we're going to end up seeing, if I was guessing, I think we're going to see Morgan more than we're going to see Dudu. Morgan coming from Team WE. He was good on Team WE. I think he can fit in well here. Arthur, Cad, and Johan in the jungle. 3 guys there. They're going to have to hit somewhere. 3 prospects. I think that we're actually going to see Cad to begin the season, but that's just a guess. And they have 3 different options here. So they're just kind of throwing darts at the dartboard here to see if they can find a jungler that can fit, because they have Chovy and Deft coming in mid and 80 carry with Vista on support. So Vista previously played 80 carry, now going to play support. Super interesting, this roster. We've talked about it a lot on the other shows, the Gold Card podcast and such like that, but it doesn't almost make any sense that Chovy and Deft would want to go to this team. It almost feels like maybe this team was really close to landing a superstar jungler or a superstar support to go with Morgan. and maybe had potential to be a contender, but for me, this team's not a contender. I gave this team the bad news bear on the Gold Card podcast. I think you're going to see an underperformance from Hanwha Life. We haven't seen Chovy on a team that wasn't like really good, basically. All the teams that he's been on has been very good. And I think Deft is on the decline in his career. I think Chovy is going to be so important to this team carrying. Like, Chovy is going to have to be just an absolute monster to carry on this team, or I don't think they have the talent at 3 out of 5 positions to compete, really. Obviously, Deft is talented enough to compete. Morgan, I guess, can compete with some of the top laners in this league. I don't think he's going to be one of the best top laners in the league, but I think he can compete with some of the mid-table guys, probably a mid-table guy himself. Vista and their 3 jungle options, they're going to have to hit the middle of the dartboard with one of their jungle options, and Vista's going to have a real surpriser of a season in order for Hanwha Life to compete. I am not high on Hanwha Life this season. I think they're going to have a tough split and try to figure some things out in the future. Over to KT Rolster. Doran in the top lane. We've now seen Doran in a few different teams. He's always been pretty solid everywhere that he's gone. In the jungle, they go with Blank, Bonnie, and Gideon, kind of a darts at the dartboard setup there as well. Bonnie coming from Gen.G Academy. Slightly touted prospect, but Gideon, coming from the Griffin system, is really the touted prospect coming into this team. Blank, we've seen on T1 before. He was an acceptable jungler on T1, but not insanely exciting. I would expect them to maybe start the season with Blank or Bonnie and end the season with Gideon. They might just go straight to Gideon. We'll see. I think Gideon is definitely the main prospect for the team. Coming in with Doran, and then in the mid lane, Ucal, who they're building around. Hybrid coming over from APK/Solhey Prince. He was kind of the shining light on that team. And then Rebel, who's coming from T1 Academy. So another one of the pretty good prospects coming over there. So you have a solid top laner. I'm only going to call Ucal a solid mid laner at this point. I haven't been that impressed with him in the last few splits. An above average AD carry, and then some hot prospects in Gideon and Rebel. The team has upside, no doubt about it. Sorry guys, give me just a second. Sorry. This team has a lot of upside. If both of their prospects work out, 2 high-level, rookies like a Piosik and Keria from last season, and then you add in Doran, Ucal, and Hybrid, yeah, this team could contend. For me, they're middle of the table for the moment, with contenders upside, is how I would view KT Rolster. Next we go over to Sandbox, who's now Liiv Sandbox. Mostly stuff you're going to remember. Summit still here, Fate still here, Leo and Route. Effort comes in from T1 since T1 picked up a new support. Effort's got to be an upgrade for them. And then Krako comes in the jungle from Brion/High Fresh Blade from Challengers. One of the only really touted prospects coming in that's not from T1 or Griffin. Krako, very touted, very touted. So we have a very good prospect coming in to go with an upgraded support and the Sandbox roster from last year for the most part. This team seems pretty good. They're going to need Krako to work out. They're going to need Effort to look good out of the T1 system. But Summit was very good when he was motivated. And I think they're still maybe going to have a problem with their 2 carries. Their mid and AD carry are not on the level of any of the top teams. But they've got a 3-man core there that could be very good in Summit, Krako, and Effort. I wouldn't be surprised to see this team pick up a mid or AD carry going into even summer 2021. If they seem like they can compete in spring to some degree or another, I can see them adding a star carry to try to get over the top, because I'm just not sure jungle top support being great is enough. I think one of your carries probably has to be a star, particularly probably mid, and I'm not sure we've seen enough yet from Fate. We're going to need to see a step up from him if this team wants to be anywhere near competing. But the team looks solid. I'm happy with Sandbox's lineup. Going over next to Nongshim RedForce, we have Rich coming back as a people that don't know Rich. He was the best Heroes of the Storm player of all time, like the faker of Heroes of the Storm. Now he comes over and has his first season. He was very, very good. I was very impressed with Rich in his first year playing League. They pick up Peanut in the jungle. Peanut coming over from LGD. Peanut was an absolute monster on LGD. If he comes over here, I want him to add... So Nongshim RedForce's team dynamics from last season, for the most part. You'll see Kellen, you'll see Diokdam. The thing for them is they were too slow and methodical for me last season. I didn't think they had the explosiveness, the big plays. Peanut is a big plays and explosiveness type of player. So if he can come over here and bring the explosiveness and the big plays to this team, they pick up Bay in the mid lane coming from the Griffin system. I actually really like this team. If Peanut can bring that fire, and if Bay pans out as a rookie prospect, I think Diokdam's very good. I think Kellen is good. Rich, I think, is great. And the thing for them, like I say, is that I just thought that they just weren't proactive enough and didn't make enough moves. They didn't have the flashy plays. And I think that Peanut can bring that to this team. I'm very high on Nongshim RedForce. I really like them this season. I think they're going to have a good year. So I'm higher on them than I think most people are, but I see a lot of potential in this team for this season, and I hope that gets realized. Last up, we have T1. Kana coming back, just an insane season last season, and he's bringing it back. Cuz, Elam, and Owner in the jungle. I think we might see Elam more this season. And when we saw him, he was very good, so looking good there. In the mid lane, Faker and Closer, who we saw last season. Hard to say who will get more of the starts. I would like to see them start Faker, and if he's really seeming like he's on the decline, then maybe we see Closer. In the bottom lane, Teddy and Gumayusi. Gumayusi, when we've seen him, has been good, but Teddy should be the starter there. And at support, they trade Effort for Keria. So Effort for Keria. Keria, one of the few places that you can get a real upgrade on Effort. Effort was pretty good last season, but Keria was the best support probably in the world, or at least arguing in the world, definitely in the LCK for me. I think you see an upgraded roster here, an extra 6 months of experience for Kana, an extra 6 months of experience for Elam, an extra 6 months of experience for Closer if he has to come in. Teddy and Keria, the best bot lane in the league. T1, as you're going to see, are my number one in my power rankings. I think a downgrade for Damwon, an upgrade for T1, a fresh start for T1, given how last season went for them. I'm going to go ahead and make T1 and Damwon are my top tier of my power rankings. You could put Damwon first. I would not argue at all. Like I said, Damwon has just crushed everybody recently. There's no reason not to have them first unless you have some inkling. And I have a slight inkling. I really think this T1 team is going to end up being extremely good. Unless we see a fall off from Kana and Elam, which does sometimes happen in the offseason. We see a fall off from a promising prospect. If we don't see that, and we see improvement from those guys with an offseason, I just think that T1 roster is going to come together beautifully and look fantastic. So I've got T1 power ranked first, Damwon in second, Gen.G in third, and they're in their own tier here because I don't think that any of these teams are going to be able to compete with these three teams. Unless, there's always obviously a range of outcomes for every team, and there's some teams here that have a range of outcomes where they compete with those teams. But I think in an average split, these three teams are going to be significantly better than everyone else, and Gen.G is going to be just a step down from T1 and Damwon. So, two teams fighting to win the league, a third team kind of gatekeeping the final rounds of the playoffs, and then everybody else down here. In fourth, I have Nongshim RedForce. I really believe in this team. I think they're going to be really good this season. But they are my crazy pick, my hot take for the LCK video. I really think they're going to be very good. Next, I have KT Rolster. I think a sane person just puts KT Rolster above Nongshim RedForce, even if you really like Nongshim RedForce, because KT looks very, very good. They have proven commodities, UCal, Hybrid, Doran, and then they have some real stud potential in Rebel and Gideon. So I think a person who isn't crazy just puts KT Rolster in fourth, but I just have an insane level of belief in Nongshim RedForce. So I put them fourth and fifth, followed by Afreeca, another lineup that's very, very good, but maybe doesn't quite have the talent to compete with your T1s and your Damwons. I think there's a really steep drop-off after Afreeca when we move down to Liiv Sandbox. And once again, this is just my thoughts, but Sandbox and HLE come in the next tier for me. With Sandbox, you have problems with the mid and AD carry role. You got some other great players on the team, but the mid and AD carry role is a struggle. For Hanwha, you have problems in the jungle, possibly the top lane, the support role. This is a lineup that could have been a top 5 roster in the LCK in different splits, but this is just a really tough split, man. The LCK has some really powerful teams this split, and so I just don't think I can have Sandbox or Hanwha any higher than 7th and 8th for me. They could maybe sneak up above an Afreeca, or if Nongshim has a floor season, they could sneak up above a Nongshim. I can't see them being better than KT or any of the top 3 teams for sure. So I think like the ceiling for Sandbox and Hanwha Life for me is like 5th place. And then down in the bottom tier is just the 2 rebuilding teams, DRX and Fredit Brion. I don't think either of those teams expects to do anything this season. I don't think we should expect them to do anything this season. I think they're almost definitely going to be 9th and 10th. Looking at the Bovada Futures, and then I will compare them in a minute. They have Damwon as a -120 favorite as of right now, T1 at +275, GenG at +550, so they're kind of in line with me to some degree right there. They go HLE in 4th at +750, Nongshim at 1600, Afreeca 2500, DRX 2500, Sandbox at 3000, KT at 3300, and Brion at 66. So let's see how their rankings compare to my rankings to figure out where there might be some value in a futures bet. So Damwon, they have them ranked 1 spot higher than me. They have them as a favorite to win the league. I actually think it's T1. T1 I have ranked slightly higher than them. Bovada has them 2nd most likely to win the league, where I think they're the favorite. But the thing is, the odds just aren't good enough. +275 is just not good enough. We broke down our percentages on the Gold Card podcast. I had T1 right about, I think, 26 to 28% to win the league, and that's not going to be enough to justify +275. So not even considering betting T1, even though they're plus money, and I think I have them as my #1 team. Not even considering it. GenG in 3rd place, not really any value on +550. If you gave me +550 on them to beat T1 and then Damwon the next day, I don't think I would take the +550, and that's basically what you're betting on here. They have to be able to beat those 2 teams. Hanwha Life, I have 4 spots lower than Bovada does, so there's definitely no value there for me. 7.5 to 1 on Hanwha Life, no thank you. Nongshim RedForce, surprisingly, I'm only 1 spot higher on them than Bovada is, but 1600 still doesn't feel good enough for them. They're a team that I'm probably irrationally in favor of, and even then I'm not sure that I think that 16 to 1 is good enough for them. These top teams are just super, super good, and 16 to 1 just doesn't seem realistic to me. They have Afreeca and DRX the same, which just shows you how bad the books are at pricing things. There's nobody that will tell you that this DRX lineup with 3 rookies and Piosik is as good as this Afreeca roster with 4, league-winning type veterans and Fly. So this just shows you the books do not price correctly, but neither one of those are even remotely interesting to me. Sandbox, you can see that DRX, they have 4 spots higher than me. Afreeca, they have them right where I have them. Sandbox is a +1. I have them 1 spot higher than Bovada does, but 30 to 1 still doesn't feel good enough for this Sandbox roster that I had in 7th place. Just don't think they have any chance of getting there. The only one that really interests me, you can see Brion in 10th place on both, doesn't interest me at all. They're a full rebuild team, and I can't see them being a profitable futures bet. The one spot where I'm interested is KT Rolster. +3,300, they're a team that I have in 5th, but if my irrational RedForce love does not turn out to be true, then maybe this is the fourth best team in the league. If you could argue that if Gideon and Rebel both work out pretty well, that this team could even be better than a Gen.G. I don't think it's hard to argue that they're anywhere near the T1 or Damwon, but they're kind of like my RNG in the LPL. These odds seem good enough to me for the roster that KT Rolster has here to take a small shot on KT Rolster. Bovada does have them 4 spots lower than I have them in power rankings, and there's a pretty good argument that I should have them a spot higher, in which case Bovada has them 5 spots lower than I have them in the power rankings, which generally, you have to work out what percentages you think a team is to win the league, and what percentage the Bovada odds are saying that the team should be to win the league. It's not just about where you have them ranked versus where Bovada has them ranked. I just use that because it's an easy, good visual way to show you the difference in thoughts, which might lead you to believe that the odds are incorrect for a team. And if I think they're the 4th best team in the league, and they're priced as the 9th best team in the league, that's something I'm going to want to look at and compare the percentages to. And with KT Rolster, I do think there's a reasonable argument that they're the 4th best team in the league, and could maybe even step up to 3rd best team in the league. So at 3,300, I think that's the only bet that I'm even kind of interested in the LCK. The future's just not great in the LCK this season, unfortunately. But that's where I'm at with the LCK. Hopefully that was a decent, quick little rundown for everybody. Do check out the esports department. Our projections are now live for the first slate on Saturday. And I'm excited to see everybody in the Discord and hanging out again. I will talk to you guys later. Have a good one.